Welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight, the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink, bane of bullies, hero to dogs and small children everywhere. Basically arguing that Islamophobia, dislike or fear of Muslims, is one of the drivers of terrorism. And you said this: what can we do about the tiny fraction of Muslims committing such unspeakable violence we saw in San Bernardino, Paris, and Brussels? You don't address problems within the religion or the Islamic community. You turn it instead back on America and the West by saying our intolerance causes this. Am I misreading your point?
By the same token, I think with respect to the article that you're referencing, I was actually relying on research that came out of Stanford University that showed that essentially anti-Muslim bigotry and discrimination, or what we commonly refer to as Islamophobia, can contribute to a sense of what they term as cultural homelessness.
But you can see why this looks a lot like victim blaming. So you've had an awful lot of Americans killed and injured by Islamic terror in the past 8 years. A lot, almost 100 killed, 350 or more injured. And you're basically saying that that happened because America is not hospitable enough to Muslims, and that seems unfair.
Absolutely. That there's actually a greater threat of terrorism from white supremacist groups and right-wing extremists than there are from individuals who self-identify as Muslim.
Well, that's just not true. Actually, no, it's not. There haven't been 100 Americans killed in the last 8 years, 350 wounded from right-wing extremists in the United States. That's not true. And if you claim it is, I'd ask you to cite your source.
The FBI. So according to the FBI. The FBI data indicates that there have been more acts of terrorism committed by right-wing extremists and white supremacists. In addition to that, last year, Duke University...
In the last 8 years, there have been 100 or more than 100 people killed by white supremacists and more than 350 wounded by white supremacists in America. That's not true.
So I'm referring to the number of acts of domestic terrorism as opposed to victims. So
look, I mean, obviously you're making a point that is unsupportable. I'm talking about actual acts of terrorism. People die, people get wounded. I mean, we can define terrorism many different ways. I'm just saying you've had an awful lot of people killed by Islamic extremists, and what I hear you saying is we're not going to take a moment to reflect upon why this is happening within our community, but instead we're going to look at the larger community and blame them. That's what I see happening. What does it mean? I mean, okay, so let's say there are 10,000 right-wing extremist terrorist acts every day. It still doesn't answer the question, why are people coming to this country in the name of Islam killing Americans? And don't you think you should pause for a minute and reflect on what's gone wrong within your community?
I don't think anything has gone wrong in my community. You know, first of all, there are about 3 to 7 million Muslim Americans in this country, and the individual who perpetrated this atrocity at this university is far from representative of that 3 to 7 million.
Well, I don't think he is either, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying I'm an Episcopalian, and if you saw 100 people murdered by Episcopalians in the name of the Archbishop of Canterbury in the last 8 years, a lot of us at church would be saying, what the hell is this? So what can we do to stop it?
Right, and so let's take a moment to reflect upon that. When there are extremists that perpetrate a bombing at an abortion clinic in the name of Christianity, as Americans, we know enough about Christians and Christianity to sort of place a psychological space between that act that was committed by that individual and the rest of the population.
I'm sorry, I can't take that seriously. The scale is just not proportionate or comparable at all.
I would disagree with you. I think that the numbers say something different.
I actually wrote a whole book on crime. I know what the numbers are. It's not even close. It's not even close. Are you really telling me that there's no soul searching that you think Muslim Americans have to go through?
I think it's important to realize that Muslim Americans are your doctors, they're your teachers, they're your politicians, they're your nurses.
But a tiny percentage are also your terrorists. So why is this happening? It's not just the fault of white Americans. That's what you're saying. So I found something to be offended about. Some say the lyrics have creepy, offensive overtones, so a new version was penned with updated lyrics.
Original version, it's fine. We do like the original version as well. The thing is just that listening to it in our generation's context is definitely different from the 1940s context.
Yeah.
It sounds different to different ears.
So what do you mean by that? Sounds different is not good in this case, I have the feeling, or you wouldn't have rewritten it.
Well, we rewrote it just as like a fun thing to do between us. We weren't necessarily offended by the first version. We just were listening through it and we were like, that doesn't sound so great when you take all the music away and the history of it. Today it sounds pretty creepy.
Pretty creepy. So, but I mean, you're young people. You live in the modern world. You hear hip hop and rap. I mean, explicit references to rape, encouragement to rape is really common in that music. Do you ever rewrite any of it?
Yeah.
Have you rewritten any Lil Wayne or anything?
No, and we're completely aware of that too.
Yeah.
But again, it wasn't necessarily like an attack on anything.
Yeah.
It was more just fun, and it seemed contextual because it's Christmas time and the song was on the radio a lot. And you know, we don't agree with those types of lyrics at all.
The critique has been that you made it less romantic. That while consent is obviously essential, and I don't think anyone would contest that, explicit legalistic consent maybe is less romantic than, say, implication or nuance. Do you see that?
Yeah, and we did that. We did it on purpose. I mean, we were trying to be like militant and funny about it. It was, especially the part where he says you reserve the right to say no twice. Yeah. We realized
no one's going to say that in a regular conversation, and we know that.
But what do I know? I'm 47.
No, that would be weird.
Yeah, but does it seem like we're in the middle? I mean, it's always important, I think, to remember that we're in an era, no matter where we're living or when, we're in a moment. And that maybe our current moment is a moral panic of a sort, where people are very easily offended, and a Twitter, and there's a lot of pearl clutching going on about this or that offensive statement. Yeah. Do you feel that? Would you notice that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. In the PC cops kind of stuff, like that really is going on right now, and people are offended because we're trying to have so many conversations at once with like the oversaturation of media and stuff. So it's hard to focus on one thing at a time. And so everybody gets upset about a lot of things at once because there's a ton to be upset about.
Yeah, a lot of information.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, all kinds of traditional children's songs, if you look at them through the lens that a lot of people are looking at this song through, it's easy to get offended. I mean, Yankee Doodle Dandy has a line in there about "with the girls be handy." Is that adding to rape culture, do you think? Or Mary Had a Little Lamb, is that insensitive, do you think, to the animal rights people? Does it feel that way?
You know, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's, you know, offensive or that's promoting rape, but I think it can't hurt to just update it. You know, just update it to a different song if you want to. Let's just kind of have some fun with it.
Yeah.
So like Yankee Doodle got the girl's consent before getting handy with her, sort of thing?
No, not necessarily, but I mean, it's you know, kids, everyone's afraid of what the kids are listening to, and they want to make sure that they're listening to good, wholesome stuff, and sometimes it can be taken differently than how other kids take it. So making one updated version as just an example of, you know, a good example of a respectful conversation, or the correct way to do something couldn't necessarily hurt.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the song Frere Jacques, right?
Yeah.
You know, Frere Jacques. I mean, there's a line in there where he's asleep, and the morning bells are ringing, and he doesn't wake up, and I'm feeling like, well, maybe that's a little insensitive to narcoleptics. Does that feel that way to you at all?
That was really funny. No.
Okay, good. Just a test. I just want to see we're on the same page.
I love it.
It's great to see you. And as much as I'm making fun of this, because I think it needs to be made fun of, you're obviously really talented, and I appreciate your coming on. Continue to patronize the public. Let me just make one thing really clear. So the poorest segment of our society is young people. In fact, this generation is the poorest generation of its age in 3 generations. They're the poorest. And yet we're forcing them to buy into the system to subsidize the health care of the old and the sick, who are also the richest segment of our population. Why is that fair, and why would you expect them to like it?
They're not spending a lot of money for peace of mind and protection. And I think that is a good deal. One of the reasons I'm so passionate...
They don't think it's a good deal,
Tucker, are you going to let me finish the mic?
Well,
one of the reasons I'm so passionate about health care reform...
They don't think it's a good deal. That's why you're trying to force them to do it, right? Am I missing something? I just trying to get a straight answer from you. You're trying to force them to do something they don't want to do. You're telling them it's a good deal, but they don't believe it's a good deal. Why don't they believe that?
And a lot of them haven't explored what the deal is. They've heard your rhetoric that it's not a good deal, and they haven't actually seen. Most of them, if they're not earning a lot of money...
So you're saying that I've convinced people that Obamacare isn't as great as it really is? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, there's certainly been a lot of very bad rhetoric and very bad attacks on it, rather than give it its fair shake.
Are you going to blame right-wing talk radio?
I do think we can actually make the deal better. I've made proposals out there how to adjust it.
To add to what you said, the president began this with a joint speech to a joint session of Congress in 2009, in which he said, Obamacare will be the end of the discussion of how to organize health care in this country. I was sitting right there, and he said that. He promised us that it would be perfect upon arrival. Shouldn't someone at least acknowledge that that wasn't true before we move on to the next iteration of Obamacare? Are we just going to keep lying and hope nobody notices?
That is totally untrue statement. The president never thought it was going to be perfect upon arrival.
Do you want me to read you the quote?
We live in a democracy. No legislation is perfect. all of us who worked on it knew that when it was finished, there were issues we would have the president made possible. In fact,
it's the same story. It's a great deal. You're just too dumb to get how great it is. I've heard this before. Thanks a lot, Doctor. I appreciate your coming on. Thank you. I understand that, but what the mayor was saying is, look, there are federal laws about who's allowed to be in the country and who's not, and we're ignoring them, and there's nothing you can do about it. Why is that not a violation of the law itself? You're an elected official looking at the federal government and saying, I'm not obeying. Why is that okay?
Well, I don't think that that's what the mayor's saying, that he's not obeying. What the mayor's saying is that he's going to protect residents of the city, in the city of New York. And in the city of New York, we have individuals who are documented and undocumented, and he's looking out for the best interests of the residents.
So New York is a sanctuary city, which means it protects people who are breaking immigration laws, right? There are federal laws, they're being broken, but those people are protected by the city of New York. My question is, once you start deciding we're not recognizing certain laws, why stop with immigration laws? Why wouldn't New York City be a sanctuary city for tax evaders, for example, or people who use heroin? I mean, who decides which laws New Yorkers have to follow and which they don't?
But we also have every right to say, hey, we want to defend our constituents, whether they're documented or undocumented. And this is very clear. The reason that the mayor is being so frank is because of President-elect's stance on immigration and what he plans on doing. And so,
but his stance is not different from what the law currently is under President Obama. He's merely saying, I'm going to enforce the law. And your argument is you shouldn't enforce the law.
No, what
sort of an odd message for an elected official to send.
It's my responsibility to protect them all.
But I wonder if you have a responsibility to other people in this country, like, say, the middle class in New York, which has been shrinking every year since I can remember. They're obviously impacted negatively by illegal immigration because they're paying the bills for people who aren't citizens. Where's the concern for them? I never hear anybody on the left say, what about, like, ordinary people working 2 jobs? You know, they don't have a lot of money. They're paying for the stuff. What about their interests? Are you interested in that? What do you say to the millions and millions and millions of people who are waiting in line in foreign countries to do it the right way? And it's a long process. They're suckers, aren't they? And you're pointing out what suckers they are by helping the people who broke the law.
No. So, well, I'm being quite frank. We also have to understand that these individuals who are undocumented, who are here, you know, they're here because they want to get a better life for themselves.
I get it, but no, I'm talking about other people. What about all the decent people who want to come here to make a better life for themselves, but they can't because they have to follow the laws? What about them? Doesn't this make a mockery of what they're doing?
No, and again, the immigration system is not perfect. It is flawed, and we both know that.
But are you making it better, or are you encouraging people to break the law by giving them sanctuary here?
No, we're not encouraging anyone to break the law.
Really?
No, yeah, really. We're not encouraging anyone to break the law.
But you're saying if you make it to New York, you're all set. You know, no one's gonna come grab you because we're gonna protect you. If I'm in a foreign country and if it's a choice between waiting in line for 3 years to get a visa or just like showing up illegally and getting to New York, why wouldn't I choose the latter?
No.
Thank you so much for having me, Tucker.
Oh, of course. This struck me when I read it as a pretty cowardly thing for you to say for a bunch of reasons, but mostly because it's so imprecise. Okay. You don't spell out what you mean. You say that that's interesting. Why is that interesting? Would it have been better if this guy, the murderer, had continued to hack people with a butcher knife? Is that what you're saying? What are you saying?
No, I'm saying, Tucker, what's cowardly is to make up a false narrative that I didn't say or even imply by saying that I was not impressed or I was dissatisfied with the police's work and saying that it was cowardly. That's disingenuous.
To explain yourself, and I'm asking you, what did you mean by that? Is the guy,
and I'll be glad to do that.
Who shot this guy a hero, or isn't he?
I'll be glad to answer that, but I don't want to do the false narrative thing because that's just very disingenuous, and I like to bring truth to power.
The question.
Now, let me explain what I meant. Yeah. Okay. No, I didn't think that the guy was wrong for what he did. The guy was a hero. The comment wasn't meant to racialize the actual shooting and the event itself. When that happened, online, there were a lot of people who played the race card, and the minute they found out who the suspect was, they kept talking about black Somalian, then they started talking about Black Lives Matter, then they started talking about Obama, then they racialized it. So, that's normal.
I'm sorry. Okay. There's only so much I can take. I spent all afternoon listening to your podcast, which is the most racialized thing I think I've ever listened to in my life. And not
which is not true. Which is not true.
Let me say this. You sent a series of tweets here noting the race and the nationality of the terrorist, and you also put quotes around the word terrorist. If you drive your car through a crowd of people and murder someone with a knife, are you not a terrorist? Why did you put quotes around?
I didn't say that the man. I didn't say that the man wasn't a terrorist. Tucker, are you going to say anything honest before we get the interview started, or it's just going to be a bunch of projection
of your suspected,
Why did you put suspected white supremacist views?
The word terrorist. Okay.
Because I don't know if I didn't know if the guy was a terrorist or not. I didn't know if he was a suspect. I didn't know if that was the only suspect. So I didn't have all the facts. I wanted to wait for all the facts to come in before I labeled people, which is what you should do.
Okay. If someone drives his car through a crowd of people, here's what we knew from the first moment this happened. A guy drove his car through a crowd of people, intentionally hitting them, and then he attacked one of them with a knife. What else do you need to know in order to conclude that man is committing an act of terrorism? What's the missing piece there for you?
We didn't get all the facts initially because initially they said that there were other suspects. So I didn't have all the facts in. So I wasn't in the position to label anybody or bring my opinion to the table. I wanted to wait to see what all the facts were before I labeled people. And that's what you should do, Tucker.
No, you didn't. What you were trying to do is incite race hatred, which is what you do for a living, making this about race from the very start, when in fact race played no role. Now, you make the claim repeatedly in your writings and on your show, this is a, quote, white supremacist country. The guy who did this was imported here at taxpayer expense from Somalia. He was living, I believe, entirely on taxpayer expense. It was government-subsidized education at Ohio State. Why would a white supremacist country import Africans in large numbers and then pay for them to live here? I don't understand. It doesn't speak in narratives. It doesn't really fit your narrative, does it?
So we don't live in a system of complete white supremacy? Everybody's lying, Tucker?
Huh. So the overwhelming majority of immigrants to this country are non-white. Why would a white supremacist country import massive numbers of non-white immigrants? Not to blow your mind.
When you say non-white, I mean, there's Hispanic people who you say are non-white, but they're labeled as white. There are a lot of people who are classified as white that you say are non-white. So you play this racialized game. So who's non-white and who's white?
Okay, look, I guess the point I'm making is that it's not 1955. It's a totally different country from the one you seem to be addressing on Twitter and in your podcast. Then answer this.
How's it different, sir?
In your tweet, it's different in this way. It is an entirely multi-ethnic country. It's not just black people and white people, one oppressing the other. It's a much more complicated landscape, as you may have noticed if you go outside. And so when you tweet out that this is a story of a white man killing a black man, that is misleading. That's not at all what happened. There was no racial motive that we know of here, and you're implying there was.
I didn't say there was a racial motive. Because it serves your
financial... Well, of course you did. You said that white officers shot a black Somali suspect.
Tucker. This is Fox News. You guys are the race casino. Forget about the race card. You play the race casino. So it's very hypocritical for me to specify the race of a suspect and a police officer, and that is supposed to be some kind of problem when you guys do it all the time and arbitrarily blame black people for everything negative in this country.
Here, I'm not even going to rise to the debate. Let me just say that I think when normal people, and I'm excluding you from that category, watched what happened yesterday, they didn't see the race of the terrorist or the race of the cop. They saw an American stopping a lunatic from murdering more people on a college campus.
So why did your white supremacist colleagues make it racial? So why did they make it racial? Why did so many people in the right? How did they make it racial?
I don't know one person on any network who looked at this and said, here you have a white man killing a black man. They said, here you have a police officer, representative of
they said black Somalian,
stopping a mass murder from continuing.
So was it Black Lives Matter fault? You guys always seem to blame Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter is any black person you choose to make Black Lives Matter. So
okay. I'm missing the thread of your argument, but I think you've made your
You're not
point.
missing it.
Yeah,
you got it.
I'm not.
You're a smart guy. Suspected white supremacists are very smart, so you got it.
Right. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.